a very warm welcome to everybody who has joined us today for the webinar. We will be chatting about creating synergy through collaboration. We will be joined by three speakers. We've got Gill Hart, who is the founder and CEO of GH Direct. Thank you for joining us, Gill. We've got very nice to have you. We've got Mitchan from he is the Chief Technology Innovation Officer and co-founder at Ozow. Really nice to have you joining us, Mitchan.
Thank you.
And of course, we have Antoine, who's the CEO and co-founder at FinTech. So really looking forward to a great discussion about collaboration. What's really interesting is collaboration is a word that we all hear in our companies today. And there's two different things to it. There's internally where we have collaboration between teams, where it's really important for us to sort of learn from each other, problem solve together to reach better results as a team. But then you also have collaboration between organizations and looking at organization between startups, between corporates, between freelancers, and the whole thing, that power of synergy is that you're better, the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts. So looking forward to diving into that and getting a better understanding of it, and also how important it is to collaborate. Before we get started, my name is Krystle Hastings. I'm the head of marketing at FinTech, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Our agenda today, we'll just do a quick introduction through a video to tell you a little bit about why we have these videos, these webinars, and who runs them. Then we'll go straight into the panel discussion. We'll go through a series of questions with each of our speakers. But please feel free to put your comments below or your questions below, and we'll be happy to address them during the panel discussion. And then if we don't get to your question during the panel discussion, we'll also bring them up at the end in the Q&A session. So please feel free to ask away. And here is our video. So as you can see, FinChatbot is working and collaborating alongside French Tech to bring you these knowledge sharing webinars. And if you have any questions about the talk today or about these webinars, please feel free to email us at marketing@finchatbot.com. And that is the introduction section of this. And now we'll jump into the questions for the panel, which will be really exciting. Before we start with questions, Gill, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you before we get into the collaboration discussion?
Sorry. Right, that's better. Thank you, Krystle. Thank you for asking me to be part of this today. So my name is Gill Hart, and I am the owner of a consulting business called GH Direct. I have had my own business now for 15 years, but I have a long history in the direct marketing financial services industry, starting my career as a receptionist in a business where the only way of direct marketing was through direct mail, and we had many bags of letters that were coming through from customers processing debit orders, etc. And slowly that moved into the telemarketing era of direct marketing, which I then joined a business for 7 years and got to know that industry very well, and have now had my own business for the last 15 years and have dealt with and had very exciting projects with very many insurance businesses, banks, where call centers are part of the project, are the entire project, but always looking at new and innovating ways for this direct to customer play. So in a nutshell, that's a bit about me. Thanks.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. And I think sort of there's like a lot of collaboration between FinChatBot and your business as well, which we can dive into a little bit more. So really glad to have you with us. Mitchan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Ozow?
Sure. Okay, so I am, I am a bit complex, I would say. I'm the merger of a logical and creative brain. So I've studied software development professionally, but I think I'm more artistic than anything else. And I put those two together to make a creative software, in my view. I've been in payments for about 16 years now. Started out as a stockbroking firm, doing some software for the JSE, and then moving on to a payments gateway for 7 years. Took a bit of a break from payments for about a year, but then got back into payments. That's been my bread and butter. And yeah, myself and Thomas Pays and Lyle Eckstein started Ozow in 2014. So we've been running for about 7 years now, 5 years technically, because those first 2 years was the hustling years where we didn't have a salary coming in. And yeah, at this point, I would say we run the biggest and most successful EFT payment option in Africa, I would say. At this point, we are competing with credit card companies, but we solely focus on EFTs. And yeah, we collaborated with FinChatBot in specific ways that we'll discuss later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mitchan. That's really, really interesting. And I think it's so important for the startups to collaborate with each other as well as with to work with corporates. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts on that. And then we have Antoine with us as well. I don't know if his camera's on yet, but Antoine, would you like to do an introduction of yourself? There we go, in the car,
yes.
The multitasker.
Yeah, sorry. a little bit. That's why I'm working in the bot space, is to automate part of my life, I guess. I'm Antoine Paillusseau. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FinChatBot, originally from France. I have more of a business background, but managed to evolve quite quickly in the tech space, with more of a sales hat, so understanding how to sell tech to different businesses. Moved to South Africa in 2014, started a business in the lead gen space, so technological platform in the lead gen space, and we were servicing quite a bit of the financial service providers, and realized pretty quickly the kind of gap that there was between marketing providers of traffic, leads, etc., and the actual agent that were selling those policies, where we felt we could create a fantastic user experience in different ways, and engaging on the favorite apps of users like WhatsApp and so on. So yeah, founded the FinChatBot in 2016. We are now 40 plus in the business, operating in different regions, Europe and Africa. Which is exciting, but yeah, I guess we go into the more of the solution, but that's a bit about me.
Awesome, thank you so much, Antoine. Okay, so let's dive into it. Let's get into the panel discussion. Really a discussion between each other. So let's go for it. So the first question that I'd like to ask is: so we know that Ozow and FinChatBot collaborate from a product solution perspective. So I think I'm going to ask this question to you, Mitchan, first. Can you tell us a little bit about how you collaborate on a product solution, and what synergy and value this has brought to both organizations?
Okay. So firstly, I remember the day actually Antoine got his first investment, because I was in the back row at Africa Arena. So the people that invested in them is Gill Ventures, and they've also invested in us a few years before that. And with that, we became, call it, sister companies. And Gill kind of, they drive their companies to try and work together and see where the synergies are, and how we can then create a joint value offering to an end consumer. Specifically, two projects I can speak about that we've collaborated on is the Nashua Children's Charity Fund and MTM Momo. So on the Nashua aspect, that is a charity fund that helps a bunch of kids that are orphans or are sickly or anything like that need a bit of help. And you always need a way to donate. With the aspect of COVID coming in, you don't want to deal with real cash money. EFTs and credit cards are always also the option to go, but we focus on EFT. What FinChatbot did there was they gave a nice, basically a chatbot web-based one, and they call our payment gateway and they bring in the entire option and drive it within the chat itself, which is very different to how other people do it. Other people do it, they call our endpoint and they get a link, and then they send that link either via SMS or, it shows up on WhatsApp. But this was actually in the actual frame, in the chat. You see the options, it drives it in there. You don't have to go elsewhere and come back. So it's very nice for an end user. And exactly the same experience that you get there, you get in the MTM Momo aspect. If you want to top up your account or buy airtime or anything, you just say, yes, that's what I want to do. You put in an amount, and then our process kicks in, drives the entire process, and we pass it back to FinChatbot. But to the end user, it all seems like one seamless journey. It doesn't look disjointed at all. And I think from a collaboration perspective, that's what I like about startups. We are willing to make those custom changes within our software to make it more seamless for end users. I've been in other collaborations where, well, this is how we work and that's how you work, so let's just panel beat something to make it work. At the end of the day, you get something that does work. It's functional, but it's not the most seamless journey for an end user. Here we have a very, very seamless journey. And I mean, the teams just work great together. There's no finger pointing. There's no, we're late for delivery because your side didn't do it. We work together and we're very, very supportive of each other.
Wow, that's amazing. And what I kind of like about what you said was, sort of by working together, you're able to focus on the end user and the customer that's using it, and sort of collaborate to create almost a unique or a bespoke solution. So it gives you that agility to do that. And Antoine, what about you? What are your thoughts on sort of how Ozow and FinChatbot have collaborated and how that's brought more value to you both?
Yeah, I think what we saw by engaging with quite a number of prospects and financial institutions and retailers, etc., they are all looking for not necessarily buying a new software, but really having an expertise and a customer experience that makes sense. And we, on our side, don't want to do everything. We'd rather work with very good partners that can provide a certain value proposition. So in this case, Ozow is providing a payment solution. We don't need to hold payments. We don't want to hold payments. This is not our job, but we're going to help integrating into a customer experience that makes really great sense. Instead of having a process that requires to download an app, to go elsewhere on another environment, that every time you have a click, you have a drop off. That's the rule. There's a risk. So the idea of having a seamless integration that goes on WhatsApp, that goes on web chat, is really powerful. And we'd rather have couple of experts in the room facing one client than trying to sell one little thing, part of the value proposition. The idea is to combine that into one solution, one offering, one package that can really offer payment on WhatsApp, payment on web chat, being able to automate that process, not having human intervention, etc., etc. So the idea for us is, on our side, is to play the role of a bit of a marketplace where we can have different type of partners that complement each other, and allowing our customers to really, in a modular way, not in a black box way, because it's still what happens in a lot of software selling is they request the customer to change the system for the new one. Let's say you want a new CRM, you have to change everything. We don't want to be that, because we are humble to say that we can't fight against the Salesforce, against an IBM, we'd rather work with Salesforce, with IBM, and complement the offering to provide the ultimate value proposition, not for the customer, but for the end user. And that's really key. So it's about combining, being modular, flexible, and one point of contact that can activate multiple type of interactions.
Yep, that's amazing. And I think, just to sort of drive home sort of the point that the collaboration, that first project that we collaborated with Ozow on, it was, the ability to develop a donation solution, which was first in the charity space, where, FinChatbot had the technology to develop conversational AI. Ozow had the technology of a payment gateway. We came together to collaborate to create an end-to-end donation solution, which ultimately helps to increase the amount of donations, because sometimes donations can be a little bit difficult to make and you have to fill in different forms and send different emails, but it's an all-in-one. So that definitely was a lot more valuable together.
Maybe sorry to interrupt, but the important part of how we thought the customer experience with the team, with the Ozow team, was to say, okay, the brief we have is to be able to make a donation within 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. How can we achieve that? So when you start thinking solutions or problems based on such a statement, you don't even try to find the best, AI, the best tech. It's about the customer. Now the promise is we are able to make a donation within 30 seconds. How do we do that? So automation has to be part. Conversational AI was the main idea. Ozow, because they have a seamless system that can be integrated in this chat and can really process a payment in 2 clicks or 3 clicks, I think, when I do it. So really, really powerful. It's all about the end user today. It's how can we convince better? How can we engage better? How can we shorten the time to get to the action completed? So yeah, sorry for interrupting.
No, that's very powerful. So finding all the pieces, all the different collaboration partners to fit together to develop and deliver the best experience. Really, really cool. So moving on to you, Gill, I'd like to ask you, so with you being an entrepreneur and building up different relationships with key decision makers in both corporates and startups, how do you help facilitate collaboration between the two? And what value do you think it brings?
Thanks, Krystle. So I think that the key word that you mentioned here is relationship. I believe it's honestly at the heart of successful business dealings. In the 20 odd years that I've been working in this industry, a key to my success is revolved around these lasting business relationships that are built on trust. I think you establish your reputation in an industry firstly by the value that you bring to your client, and then by building on that relationship, that you use those interactions and just keep building on the trust and the relationship. When I first decided to go on my own 15 years ago, I relied 100% on the relationships that I'd already established in the industry. And I still use a lot of those relationships. It's at the core of the work that I do. And one of the benefits, of course, was a bit of a sideline benefit, I guess, of developing relationships with key decision makers is that, often a key decision maker will move from one corporate to another, which opens up a whole new opportunity because the trust in the relationship doesn't change just because the job profile does. So I think if you deliver consistently good service and value, your clients inherently trust your judgment then and have faith that you will know what is good for their business. I mean, often I've found new ideas have been introduced over a cup of coffee during a tea break, or after a meeting, you'll hear something in a meeting that's a business challenge, and you'll chat in the hallway afterwards about how you can bring new ideas and innovation to address that particular business issue. I think if you introduce a new idea into a solid existing relationship, it's 100% more likely to receive more serious attention than an outside introduction. So, I mean, typically I will always ensure that any new opportunities that I bring to business relationships are good for business. They must be able to see the value add and understand how this will assist business growth or improve customer service or streamline business processes. And I think you get to know what will work in businesses because you get an understanding of a business because of the relationship you have with the business at the end of the day. So it allows you to identify gaps and then to think of ideas where you can address those gaps. So I guess to bring in collaboration, it's incredibly exciting when you're part of corporate strategies and you identify areas of business that need to improve and evolve into this technology age. I'm not technology savvy at all, but I do love the innovation and the new ideas of these clever startups and how these can work together with these big businesses. And you sort of use that big corporate brand and you match it together with good and innovative technology, and you get this like explosion of new sales and improved service and happy customers who are ultimately everybody's priority at the end of the day. But I think it's challenging for startups to work their way into these corporate giants. The corporates are very open to innovation and change, but everything has to be done according to corporate channels and follow correct corporate protocol, etc. So typically you'll find a key individual in a business will be very excited about a new idea because he sees the value add that this will bring to his daily activities. And he'll want it to be implemented very quickly, but he'll take it through to business and it starts going through that business process of legal and compliance and corporate governance and protocol. And sometimes what can happen is the business can look at this and think, well, this is not a big priority in the bigger business scheme of things, and it can get pushed down, the list of priorities. And it can be an incredibly frustrating game of patience and persistence. However, if the idea is introduced at a senior level through a solid and existing relationship, again, based on trust and solid work ethic, this can help startups leapfrog through those business processes a lot quicker and allow a faster route for opportunity. So I guess in summary, if you have the right relationships and you collaborate at the right level, this should ultimately fast track ideas and implementation and help to get to the desired result quicker. So, yeah.
Maybe I wanted to add something here. I think you're completely on point, but I had a personal within the business experience where when we started, we were all wearing hoodies and sneakers and going to meet executives Yeah, I'm still sometimes, but I now have a little bit of a shirt, but still a hoodie here and there. But it was funny because we were collaborating with you, Gill, with also one of our early investors, Richard, and we had this kind of combination where, let's say, Richard has like a suit, and we were wearing a hoodie. So it was for our client a bit of an image that, okay, we're working with the cool kids, but it's actually seriously backed. Business. It's a serious business, and that kind of it's absolutely true, and that helped us quite a bit to get into, as you said, our very first references, our very first clients, to then scale up. But
yeah, we've had also similar experience. I would say we needed to prove ourselves in the market first in order to get there. So because of our current space, we're unregulated in what we do. We self-regulate ourselves, I would rather say. And for that reason, a lot of companies in the beginning were scared to go with us because of the risk that they saw in it. So we just needed that first company to come on board to, take the leap of faith with us. And that first company was Takealot. They actually decided to put their brand alongside ours, and with the brand recognition, you get a whole lot of other guys coming on board. So like, oh, Takealot uses you, then you can't be that dodgy. So it's built up to that point, but where we still find battles was with the banks. So these days we in a much better place. Banks are willing to collaborate with us these days, but it's what, 7 years later, and we're really only starting out these conversations. And then we've always also seen collaboration fatigue, if I might call it that, where we've started deals, and 4 years down the line, it still has not picked up. And exactly what you said, Joe, a decision maker comes in and the decision maker leaves, and then a new person comes in, and when they get the idea, they're all excited to get it off the ground. It starts taking some time, that excitement dies away, and then those people become quite disgruntled. I feel like maybe that's why they leave. And then the new person comes in, and it's not their idea, but it's been thrusted at them. So there's no real passion behind driving it and getting it off the ground. In that point, the onus falls on the FinTech or the startup to now drive this, to say, look, we want you guys to do this. We see the value in it. And you kind of have to now keep selling this to each of the business people. You have to go into the meetings with the person that's the champion and say, we will represent you in these meetings because we don't believe you can sell it as best as we can. We found that started working. We have to bring in our marketing teams. We put together the marketing campaigns. As sad as it sounds, that's what's needed. I even see bigger corporates not collaborating that well because of this. Yeah,
I think if you have taking your example there, and you had into those relationships, that does definitely help you. And again, say that it is an incredibly frustrating game of patience and persistence often, and it can take 4 to 5 years, and it can suddenly just take off, because it becomes a huge priority because someone else has done it already, or we're lagging behind because we're not trying these new innovations. So suddenly becomes a priority. So as long as you remain persistent and have faith in what you're trying to establish in this collaboration is ultimately better for business, then I think it does hopefully eventually come out to the right decision. So, but it is frustrating at times.
For us, it was actually COVID that did that. So we were having all these chats with all these companies, big companies, retail stores, telling them, they can use us to streamline their payments for accounts. People don't have to go into store at the end of the month and stand in a line. No, it's not our priority. It's not our priority in the future. Then COVID hit, nobody could go to a store. All of a sudden, we became number one priority for everybody. And the amount of pressure put on us to deliver then, you're trying to just do one collaboration, and now all of a sudden every single big company out there wants your business, and you're not going to say no to anybody.
No, that's a nice problem to have.
Exactly. Yeah, good for business, bad for people, because a lot of people, yeah, they have to put in the extra hours. But at the end of the day, that's collaboration, right? Doing the right things at the right time.
Exactly. And I think there's also an ongoing sort of change management that has to happen. You know, I have seen this industry go from direct mail into the telemarketing space, into sort of digital web, SMS, and I believe that there's this next wave that's coming for sure. And you need to be on top of that, because it's becoming incredibly difficult to get hold of people on the phone these days. They just don't answer the calls, and you need to be a big corporate and collaborate with a clever innovation, so you keep customers interested in doing business with you. Because if you keep doing things exactly the same way over and over again, you can't expect to change the result, and it's definitely changing. So I think that collaboration is very important to for big corporates to keep with startups, because that's where the change is happening. That's where the ears are to the ground. That, you know, you as a startup can move quicker, move faster, you know, and that collaboration needs to happen, so that the customers are excited to still do business with businesses, which is important.
One point on my side that I wanted to add quickly is having access to someone that is senior and that has this experience in the industry can also help the startup moving or redefining, not necessarily pivoting, but adding the necessary elements that are missing to get the deal done. Sometimes startups are disconnected from their own customers by not necessarily understanding well the value proposition, understanding well how the technology can be integrated. And the real challenges, to give you an example, one of our biggest challenges is not necessarily the acceptance of using our solution, but it's the corporate governance, it's the data protection, it's the integration. And we need to up our game as startups to make sure those banks are comfortable working with us, or insurance companies are comfortable working with us. And they sometimes want to work with startups, but without necessarily having the flexibility to do so, because a process to be onboarded as a vendor in one of the big South African institutions takes months. So it's months of work without generating any revenue for a startup. So it's really, really important to understand how to navigate this, and a partner that has worked in this industry or has worked with this industry can help us to find, you know, let's say a first POC that could not necessarily need a full integration, but can prove the model, get the foot on the door, and then growing steadily and within the organization, within the organization.
So yeah, I dropped off a little bit before you dropped the mic. I dropped off a little bit because the power just went away, but luckily it came back. So here I am. So I think what you were saying, Joe, it's so interesting about leveraging, you know, sort of nurturing and leveraging relationships. And I think out of, you know, the biggest success that we've had is where we find ways to leverage relationships. So it's extremely powerful. So just to move on to the next question, and it's very much about this. I think the big challenge is, you know, how do you establish and nurture a relationship to foster collaboration? Because it really is quite a tough thing to know where to start and how to go about doing that. So I think maybe, Mitchan, maybe if you could share some experiences that you have had in terms of, you know, establishing and nurturing relationships and where that's paid off.
Yeah, I think this also ties in with what Antoine just said, that you need somebody with that experience. So as a startup, you don't necessarily have it. I mean, from my aspect, I know how to code. I don't know how to network that well, at least on a business level. Thomas is a great marketer, great salesperson, can also network, but doesn't understand the product in the technical level. And same with Lyle, he understands it from a technical level as well. But when we all put our skill set together, we did create some sort of a sales monster, call it that. But we still lacked a certain aspect, which was this relationship part. And this is where we look for people that were experienced in it. We found some people from Accenture, people from Deloitte, and this is their bread and butter, relationships, consulting, all of that. And I spent quite some time with a senior guy from Accenture, and his whole thing was, you'll be in a meeting, but he'll go off on a tangent sometimes and try and find out certain personal aspects about the person. For instance, the one person we're speaking to, he found out that he's a hunter. Now, whether you agree with it or not, that's what he likes. And this gentleman seemed to know a bit about hunting as well. So he started mentioning certain guns and stuff, and that just piqued that guy's interest. And because of that, when you leave the meeting, there's a bunch of people in the meeting, and they don't necessarily know your name. You're just a startup coming in there, and they probably see a bunch of other companies in a week. But he definitely remembers this guy because he piqued his interest. He knows more about, or they share common interest now. So hunting is the common interest. They've swapped numbers. He's sending some messages on WhatsApp. Thank you for the meeting. It was great. Great chatting to you about hunting. We should get together sometime and chat a bit further on that. Then they start swapping pictures. And I think once you've done that, you almost establish a friendship on the side, on the interest. But this guy went to the point where he would even research people before we went in there, checked out their Facebook, checked out their LinkedIn. And even if he didn't share the interest, he would go and find out more about this interest and then use that as a conversational piece, either before or after the meeting, to establish that link. And then it's very difficult for them to say no, because you almost, they don't want to let you down. You're their friend now, and so you're making a request, and you're like, how can we make this happen? So with other people, they'll say no quite easily, and they're probably going to say no to you in the end if it is impossible for them to do, but they definitely are going to try to make it happen because they don't want to let you down. So I think that for me was a key. I learned quite a bit from this gentleman, and I definitely employ it now in my skill set.
I really like that. I think sometimes, in business, we're running so fast and trying to accomplish such big goals that we forget that it's kind of people first. We're still people at the end of the day, and we have interests. So doing your research to truly sort of find some kind of common connection is really, really powerful. And Gill, what are your thoughts in terms of, you've built up those long established relationships over time that you've really managed to maintain, which is amazing. How have you kind of established and nurtured those relationships to keep them strong?
So I think to a point I've already raised, it's starting with first, adding value and seeing that you can bring good, consistent service and value to the business relationship. And then to Mitchan's point, there's definitely friendships that evolve from that, which is just wonderful. Some people in business like to keep it business, and some people are prepared to engage with you more with their personal lives and so on. So I think it's also about understanding that perspective and understanding who you are dealing with in business. I think what's also quite important is when you are bringing in new ideas. I like to hope that when I do contact relationships that I've built over time, that they hear from me and they know I have something important to share that will be relevant to their business. That it's not just something I'm trying to sell off again. So when you're collaborating then on a relationship and you've now opened up a discussion, it's very important that you consistently then handle that relationship carefully, and you need to establish first what is the business goal that you're trying to address, and then if you see a business that can assist and help with that ultimate goal, then you need to stay involved, make sure that goal is reached, and sometimes that means along the way admitting that you've made mistakes or there's been errors or challenges initially, and it's about opening up and being honest about things that happen. It happens, when you starting new ideas and new innovations, there can be things that happen along the way, and it's how quickly do you react to that. You're honest about it, you're admitting it, and you have a solution quickly to address it and fix it. So in terms of that nurturing, it's largely around making sure that the promise you've given to your business relationship that you deliver on, and that you're consistently making sure that you are keeping that promise throughout the process.
I think that's really important. Something that you kind of raised was the things that you must be careful of that could damage the relationship. So that example you used of being one-sided, so maybe always approaching them, in a sales way to try and push a product would put people off very quickly. So it's always sort of understanding what they do, how you can create mutual value. I think that's a really important point, and honesty and transparency. And Antoine, are you able to give us sort of an example of where you established and nurtured relationships, and maybe some tools that you use to do that?
Yeah, so I would just maybe add something to that. I think relationship, we've said it now, is essential, and there are different ways to do it. The way you address those targeted customers, I think we now moving in a world that is more meaningful, even in the sales approach. How you sell, you do not sell boxes of a product anymore. You sell value, you sell impact, you sell also an expertise, and that's kind of the thing I wanted to add is it's not only about relationship and maintaining those how to engage and how to maintain and nurture that. It's also about being an expert at what you do. I think now businesses or stakeholders in different organizations are not looking for, an individual that's going to do everything average, but rather having few that are doing really well certain part of the value chain, for example. So taking Ozow, you guys are like the best at doing EFT in the continent. That's your value proposition, and it's amazing. And combining with us, where we see ourselves as the experts for conversational AI in the financial space, it means that we're not only selling the technology, but like a whole value proposition around it, like how to do it, the good case studies, how it works for similar businesses, shared experience, thought leadership. So it's really around providing different type of information and expertise, and building the trust that you are the partner of choice for this specific aspect. And it doesn't make sense to say yes to everything. You can't do everything, especially in the startup world, but it's tempting to say yes. You always want to have more clients, more revenue. But at some point, you need to make a call and make a decision on what you do really well. And that's the big thing you want to push. And sometimes you're going to have customers that say, no, we're going to work with your competitor because they do this differently. But we experience quite a number of times clients coming back to us after losing maybe a deal to say, okay, you guys were right in certain way. We need your expertise for those kind of aspects. So yeah, I think the expertise, the thought leadership, sharing ideas, infos, not thinking that necessarily what you sell and how you sell it is also always right. I think being humble in your approach to listen to customers, because sometimes you may have a great idea that actually won't work. So challenging your ideas with your buyers is really really essential. Yeah.
Brilliant. So trust is super important. And that's the thing, if you say you work with a partner like Gill, who's maybe doing an introduction to, say FinChatbot or Ozow, and you don't deliver on your promise, you burn both relationships. So it's delivering on what you say you will, and building that trust over time. So super, super important. So that would bring us to our next question. And this is now to talk about, sort of what are some of those lessons that you learned along the way in terms of risks, challenges, and better ways to collaborate. So very often we learn from bumping our head or burning our fingers, so we can say. So maybe if you can share, an example of what you experienced where you burned your fingers and what you learned from it. Maybe we start with you, Antoine.
Yeah, I think you get into certain deals and opportunities where you probably overpromise, not necessarily saying you can't deliver the ultimate solution, but you didn't necessarily foresee all the kind of consequences or elements that need to be aligned in order to make it work. Like taking an example, when we initially sold a solution to one of our clients informed us something we never knew, but was actually streamlined for a lot of clients, that we needed to do tests on our solution by an outsourced provider, that we would test the security, the POPI compliance, like all those elements. And that's time of dev, time of fixing the solution, time of engineers, time of architecture, times of like stress because you wait for the result of the test, and if it fails, you can't sign the deal. So it's a lot of things that you don't necessarily foresee in your sales pitch. You want to sell the solution that will have an impact on the end user. You don't necessarily think that, okay, this is a piece of software that needs to integrate into core banking or core insurance system, and it has to have a certain level of security, a certain level of compliance, and so on. That as a startup, when you build your platform in a bedroom or in a small office, you don't think of that. You think big, like, okay, I'm going to develop that and sell it tomorrow. But the reality is, those compliance governance steps are probably what can be a massive risk for startups, and that has to be taken in consideration. Pretty much, when you think a deal can be signed, the decision maker is ready and says, I agree on pricing. You're like, okay, next month we go and can start developing. You can add 2 to 3 months to that. So it's important to have a bit of runway. Runway is essential in those situations.
So trying to find the right balance between the big corporate requirements and timelines and everything, and the short timelines needed for startups to sort of get it out there and get it working and start getting results. And Gill, maybe something that you've learned along the way in terms of sort of burning your fingers in a relationship or bumped your head and you learned something along the way from that kind of challenge?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's certainly it's been a sort of a few challenges along the way. Mostly around, to Antoine's point, bringing in new innovation and trying to make this big wheel turn with that new thought and new processes. So I think startups behave very differently to corporates, and in my position, often as the middleman, kind of putting the two together, you have challenges along the way, keeping harmony between all the various parties. So, I think for me, I think you said it, Krystle, just now as well, is that if I'm bringing in a new innovation or a new business into an existing business relationship, it's ultimately my reputation as well that's on the line, because if I'm saying, here's a new idea and I have this business that's going to come in and solve this for you, I'm saying I have trust and faith in this new startup that I'm going to bring it to you, and you kind of then just have to make sure you've done your due diligence to say you do trust in this new business that you're going to introduce, you know, so that you don't end up damaging your reputation. So so you know, there's certainly been you know, challenges along the way, along just getting big business to embrace these new ideas, to work. You know, your mind can sometimes work so quickly, and you want to get it out there quickly because you can see this incredible opportunity, and you just want to see it happening in the market. And it takes a lot of time and effort to firstly, you know, sell the idea, to then go through the channels of making sure you've ticked every single box, you know, in terms of the governance and the compliance, and that you're not going to hit a roadblock somewhere along the line, and you haven't thought of that. You know, you need to be sort of one step ahead and always trying to make sure you've covered it from all angles, especially coming in as an expert in a field. You know, you need to kind of come in and bring a solution and say, I have thought of everything, you know, and so you need to be prepared, I guess, upfront to make sure that you have thought of everything, and there's nothing that the business is going to turn around and say, well, Gill, why didn't you think of that? That's glaringly obvious, you know. Then that could be potentially problematic. So yeah.
I can imagine it's not always easy to do that, especially, you know, sort of Poppy is changing and evolving, and different legal things are changing all the time. So it's quite tough to stay on top of all of that and make sure that all the boxes get ticked in that. So I'm sure that is a challenge, but it's important.
What's incredibly interesting is you know, all the Poppy and things that are very topical, obviously have been for some time. If I think of when the innovation of call centers took over from direct mail, and how unregulated it was in the beginning. You know, you could basically pick up the telephone directory and start phoning anyone, and sort of say anything. To watch this whole industry become, it actually uplifts the whole industry in a way, because in being regulated and making sure businesses have to follow certain rules, it makes sure that, you know, that the industry reputation is then sound. So it's a good thing. And I think it's going to evolve into this new technology as well. It has to embrace it, and it's going to maybe come with its own set of rules and regulations as a result, because, you know, this is sort of 20 years later that the Poppy is now, you know, coming into play since the telemarketing industry first started. So yeah, so it's an interesting change in terms of all of those challenges that we all face now.
Yeah, it really is. And it's sort of like it comes with legal ramifications, so you need to be on top of your game. So Mitchan, and I think it will be really interesting, because especially you being in the product and the technical space, maybe sort of some lessons that you've learned away, or risks or challenges that you've identified with collaboration that you could share with us.
Yeah, I'll split it up into three different aspects. So the first aspect is dealing with an enterprise company. So your bigger companies and you as a startup, and as everybody has mentioned, it takes time. You build your relationships. You can't expect that contract to be signed within a week. It's going to take months, sometimes years. But at the end of the contract, when you're just about to sign, they will change stuff. And I think that's always the intention from the beginning. They agree to certain things, and it seems like both of you are going to win in this contract. And when you get to the end, they start just pulling the plug on certain things. Like, no, we can't agree to this. We can't agree to this. And because you're a small startup and you've invested all this free time into it, you kind of oblige and you just go for it, and you end up with a deal that's not necessarily in your favor. So a deal that you thought was going to be amazing from a collaboration standpoint actually works out more for the bigger enterprise than what it does for you as a startup. So my suggestion in that is just to have a strong legal team and somewhat stick to your guns, pick your battles, make sure what you want to come out with at the end of the day, and the value you perceive needs to come to the company and also to the end user, that still stays pure. Then the second thing is, I would say, collaboration internally. And I think Gill lightly touched on this. I would say technical people probably hate salespeople because of this aspect. They go out and sell the thing, and then they come back and this is what we still make it. It doesn't exist yet. We still have to create it, and they've sold it. That's going to be ready in 2 weeks. So it ruins the whole priority side on the dev aspect. So yeah, there's a lot of misalignment that happens within departments, and in a startup, when you're small, that's okay. You guys can touch base quickly and get alignment, but as you're growing, I would say Ozow is now in a scale up as we're over 60 employees already, heading on to 100 very soon, and you find these departments just don't interact as well as they should, and this is in the beginning of the growth stages. You have to get to a point where you start establishing ceremonies where you actually have a project manager and this person saying, okay, a salesperson has identified this and we need to identify all risks. We need to, see who all is involved. A tech perspective, we need that. From a poppy perspective, we need legal people. From a commercial perspective, we need this. We're going to have some marketing campaigns in this. So we need marketing in it. Everybody then collaborates internally first before you can collaborate externally. That's very important. And I think even big companies fail at this. I was speaking to somebody at Facebook. They say they go through this daily still. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And then I guess finally just ties into that is the management of a project, having action points after every meeting, having an agenda prior to meeting. I mean, it sounds silly, but people don't do this, especially in smaller companies, because they're quick, they're agile. So a meeting just happens and it just has a subject matter, discussing company A collaboration. You go into the meeting, everybody gives their input, and then we leave. And the project falls off within a day. Weekends reset people's brains. Everybody will be on track until Friday, and then Monday, you need to remind somebody that they were supposed to do something. So you need these action points. You need it stored somewhere in some sort of a system, be it Jira, be it Monday.com, even a spreadsheet. It needs to be somewhere. That's the three things that I think we've learned through this year.
I think that's really interesting. The tools to help us collaborate can also be really helpful. It's just sort of getting used to using them, and once you do use them, you rely on them. So as you say, there's sort of Jira, Confluence, the Slack, all of those different channels to keep people aligned are so important. And I think one thing that came out from Gill, you, Antoine, was sort of being able to deal with changes as they come, unexpected changes. And I guess even the big tech companies like your Facebooks and that, I'm sure, experience exactly the same. So that's a very interesting thing, and it will always be a challenge, I guess, because change is inevitable. So we're almost at the end of our discussion. So if anybody would like to pop in their question, please do. So we're going to end off the discussion by just final thoughts on collaboration, final piece of advice that you would like to give. And maybe Mitchan, if we could start with you, what's your final advice to everybody on sort of collaboration?
Well, I think Antoine already mentioned it right in the beginning and then touched on it again lightly in the middle. It is that you can't do everything. Understand what you're good at and be the best at that, and then find somebody that's better at doing what you do in that as well, and collaborate with them. That's the only way you're going to create something that adds value and brings value to an end user at the end of the day.
Absolutely, I like that. And Gill, what would your advice be?
I would say, keep innovating, keep being creative. It's definitely, the world is changing constantly, and it's important to keep those innovations and to keep collaborating them in with the big corporate giants, and allowing the customer to enjoy the ultimate end experience of new and exciting ideas. So, message to startups in terms of collaboration and dealing with corporates is be persistent, be patient, and the change is necessary. And I think that ultimately the customer will enjoy all the new and exciting and innovative ways of doing business in the future.
Thank you very much, and completely agree, and look forward to continue to collaborate with you both and to create great things in the future. I think we may have lost Antoine on the line. So, and we don't seem to have too many questions. I might have missed one when I got kicked off by my electricity that are sort of, I seem to remember it was about around sort of Visa and around WeChat. I guess, I'm just guessing, it seemed that the question was around sort of how do you compete with those very big tech companies that, how does a smaller startup compete with those big tech companies? Maybe you could take that one for us, Mitchan.
Well, yeah, it comes back to what you said was the takeaway point, is that what are you better at and what you focus on. I mean, we could get into a whole bunch of other, there's many payment streams. There's card, there's wallets, there's voucher systems, there's cash, loyalty programs. We only do EFT. So we did that really, 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 really well. We had the likes of Paillusseau, for instance, which is a big, massive company. They had their own version of what we do. And then we had other big payment companies that also had their own versions of what we do. And they have been running for years with that. And we just came through, and our product was just much better, a lot more streamlined. We kept on innovating and getting better on it. Because our focus was on that. We were always better than their product. To a point where it's like, why are we even putting effort into this? Or why don't we just use their product? So they approached us, we signed a deal. So they have our product and they distribute it to their client base. And that helps us because it takes away a sales force aspect from us, because they have a major client base, and now we have access to that entire client base. So they've ultimately improved their final product to everybody, because at the end of the day, they are an aggregator of products. They present them okay. So they can put their focus on providing the best combination of products to their end user, instead of trying to compete with us on something that they could never compete on, because their focus was way too split. So yes, I would say then focus is number one. Focus on what you're doing. Don't get distracted. I mean, if I have to get a bit more philosophical, there's something called a BAG, a big, airy, audacious goal, your vision, your mission, your purpose. You need to have that established, and don't let your product ever stray away from that. Whenever you're trying to create a new product, you look at your BAG, you look at your vision, mission, and purpose. If it doesn't align, don't do it, no matter how much money you can make. If you are going to do it, it's a new business. Create a new business in that. Get new staff, new management, new everything, and start that new business, but it doesn't fit into the business that you're currently running.
I think that's a really powerful piece of advice, that focus is everything. And I think we all kind of had a discussion about that, where it can be tempting to say yes to every request that maybe a big corporate would like, but you'd kind of be shooting yourself in the foot. Rather keep focused, do what you do and do it well, and deliver on your promises. So with that, we will end our webinar today. I'd really like to thank Mitchan, Gill, Antoine for joining us for the discussion. It was really interesting, and collaboration is so important. And I'd really like to thank all the attendees that joined us today. And I hope to see you at the next one. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.